Welcome to the 31st edition of the Speakeasy Dwellers podcast. It is I, your host, Jared, and I am recording this as of 12:11 p.m. March 25th, 2025. I once knew a guy back in high school. For the sake of the story, let's name him Jacob. Now, Jacob was a fairly active individual in his social life. He went to parties, hung out with friends, and did what most kids do when they gain an ounce of freedom in their lives. They drink and smoke. But contrary to his actions, Jacob was not a dumb kid. He was fairly smart. Some might say brilliant. But there was one thing that Jacob didn't have, though, and that was foresight. Jacob wasn't concerned that drinking would cause his still developing mind to prune brain cells, or that his smoking would cause him to pay for his future chemotherapy treatment. No, all Jacob was concerned about at that moment was having fun, making memories, and getting with as many girls as possible. A sentiment that a lot of young single men can relate to. Growing up, I always thought consequences were reserved for the big decisions, like what career to choose or where I was going to college. But I didn't realize that even the smallest action, the subtle yet insignificant choices we make in our daily lives, can eventually add up to bigger things in the future. We become so fixated on life's big decisions that we overlook the small ones that we make and how they snowball to sometimes undesirable outcomes. But because of that oversight, most of the time we ignore the possible consequences of our own actions, believing that we live in an inconsequential life. I mean, realistically speaking, who doesn't want to live an inconsequential life? I don't want to stress about having to pay taxes, or eliminating the large sum of debt me and my parents are bearing, or even having to wake up for my classes. Simply put, having consequences is not fun. They set limits on what you can do. If I really wanted to, I could march to the center of campus blaring music and wearing nothing but the bare minimum of clothing, just because I was bored. Why? Because why not? It is all meaningless in the grand scheme of things, right? We are born, live a little, and then we die. According to a study done by the National Center for Disease Control, the average male lifespan is a little under 75 years. Some people even live far shorter than that, and the lucky few end up living just a tiny bit longer. I'd personally consider anywhere living past 80 to be living a long life. Now, 75 years might seem like a long time, but the Earth is 4.53 billion years old. That's 4 with 9 zeros after it. We, as individual humans, live for just an infinitesimally small fraction of that. Our whole existence is just a tiny blip in the grand scheme of things. However, there is a bunch of talk about living for the afterlife, an infinite timeline that supersedes your own mortality on Earth. You can see this a lot in religion. The Hindus believe in reincarnation, Christians and Muslims believe in an eternal paradise, and the Taoists believe that you become ancestral energy that can influence the living. Despite the differences in scripture and moral frameworks these religions provide, the one thing that all these religions have in common is that you live forever. This challenges the idea that we quote unquote don't live forever by suggesting that we ultimately serve a higher purpose and will continue to exist until the end of time. But I believe that the only life you should be focusing on is your mortal one, the life that we know for certain we have the privilege to live. Who knows what happens after we take our last breath? Maybe we do go to heaven. Maybe get reincarnated as the Dalai Lama. Or even have our hearts weighed against the weight of a feather. Maybe there's nothing at all. The afterlife's guarantee is nothing short of a gamble, and one that I personally will not be putting money on. Safe bets are great bets at the end of the day. So we have a time limit. We can't do everything within our lifetime. Not everyone is a millionaire. Not everyone has climbed Mount Everest. And not everyone has a family to raise their biological children with. Life is short, they say. So we must quote unquote live life to the fullest. And I'd agree. Let's create memories that will truly last, ones we won't look back on with regret for not taking a chance. But too often we hesitate. We let fear, doubt, or comfort hold us back from experiences that could shape us. We convince ourselves that there will be another time, a better moment. But what if that moment never comes? We've all had that one thing we've been avoiding. But what if we just said yes for once? I know personally I have been avoiding making several decisions in my life. But what if I said yes to just one of them? Recently, I decided to ask out a girl, pretty much out of the blue, telling myself I have nothing to lose, so why not? In the end, I got rejected, but at least I can live knowing I put myself out there and tried. That's what really matters. So why not take the leap? Say yes to new experiences, embrace the uncertainty, and just go for it. As Grimm from Smiling Friends famously said, nothing matters because we're all going to die someday. If that's the case, then why not do whatever we want? There actually is a word for this type of lifestyle: hedonism. Hedonism is a philosophical belief that pleasure or the absence of pain is the highest and primary aim of human life. It emphasizes the pursuit of pleasure and stresses the avoidance of pain. People who believe in the inconsequential life are believers of hedonism. They do anything and everything to improve their selfish lives and rarely think about the effects of their decisions have not only on themselves, but also on the people around them. Regardless of the morality of living a hedonistic lifestyle, people are still happy living their lives to the fullest. What is stopping us from living the inconsequential life? Let us do whatever we want because life is too short to be thinking about the consequences of our actions. Unfortunately, we can't ignore it. Life catches up sometimes. Who am I kidding? Life catches up all the time. You get hungover in the morning after a night of drinking too hard. You binge watch an entire season of a show telling yourself just one more episode, only to realize your phone clock reads 4 a.m. I've had to stay up some late hours to complete a homework assignment I've been pushing off for a week, and then wake up for my 8:30 a.m. exam the very next morning. Having consequences is not fun. In the case of my buddy Jacob, he ended up sleeping with a girl, unprotected, and had to drop out of college and a promising career to help raise that child. Jacob is an example of living with the consequences of adopting a hedonistic lifestyle. Short-term fun for inevitably long-term pain. But I don't think consequences are inherently evil. They're not some unseen force lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike when we least expect it. Instead, I believe they serve as the universe's way of keeping us in check, reminding us that every action we take has an impact. Consequences act as a natural balancing force, ensuring that the world doesn't spiral into complete chaos. Sometimes consequences are immediate and obvious, like touching a hot stove and burning our hand. Other times they unfold gradually, shaping the course of our lives in ways we never anticipated. They can be harsh, like failing a class after months of procrastination, or subtle, like drifting apart from a friend because of neglected conversations. But whether they hit us all at once or creep in over time, consequences are always there, shaping who we become. Rather than viewing the consequences as punishment, we can see them as feedback, guiding us, teaching us, and revealing the ripple effects of our own choices. They remind us that our actions matter, not just to ourselves, but to the people and the world around us. Speaking from personal experience, I know that I have lived a pretty consequential life, and I think that is pretty objective, not subjective. It's easy to admit you've suffered consequences for something you've done physically. You beat up someone, you went to jail. You went to bed at 5 in the morning and didn't do well on an exam you took 3 hours later. These are simple to identify in your life and in others, but to understand consequences emotionally and mentally, now that is another story. Like, for instance, let me take you back to my freshman year of high school. Imagine this. You're a young kid, fresh out of middle school, doing well academically, and riding high on the waves of puberty. That was me. I honestly thought I was going to be the coolest kid around, that everyone would want to be my friend, and I'd get along with every person in my grade. That energy turned me into a very social and confident freshman, but it also made me a very cocky freshman as well. I was so caught up in this newfound confidence that I eagerly decided to ask out a girl I had liked for about 3 or 4 years at that point. Fueled by some peer pressure and what I thought was insider info that she liked me too, I decided to go for it. But of course, I was rejected shortly after. Looking back, I totally get why she turned me down. We had almost no shared interests outside of band. I barely spoke to her because I was terrified of talking to girls. And my approach to asking her out? Well, let's just say love bombing doesn't even begin to describe it. I mean, I'm going to be realistic here. I had one of the screenshots of that conversation still on my phone and I accidentally saw it one day. And like the stuff I said was just borderline weird, with direct quotes like, I can't do this IRL because my English isn't the best and I can't explain things properly. And you said the only people who like you are perverts, right? Well, you're wrong, so don't pity me at all. Being some of the more notable things I said that night. I mean, that last one right there should explain everything there is to know about why that situation went as south as it did. I still can't believe I said that and thought that was flirtatious or quote unquote Riz. Anyways, earlier I said I got rejected and I just assumed, ah, she's just not ready for a relationship and I just got friendzoned. Like, come on, who was I kidding? I was acting like a total creep and an idiot. This was the action, and in my ignorance, I thought the rejection was the consequence. And oh boy, was I wrong. When I walked into school the next day, I learned very quickly what my actual consequences are, the ones I deserved to receive. The one thing I still remember to this day was just the eyes that were on me. It was terrifying, and to put it lightly, like a death stare your mother gives you when you broke her favorite flower vase, but multiplied by 1,000. Everyone who I knew, my friends, my peers, and even people I never even met, were just looking at me. That is when I found out that this girl took screenshots of our entire conversation and sent it to our friend group, who then eventually spread it to everybody in my high school. A supposedly private conversation between two people eventually became the dinner time conversation for everybody in my school. I got hell for what I did, and whether or not it was quote unquote morally acceptable to leak a private conversation like that with people expressing vulnerability, someone or something had to knock me off the ego high that I was riding. I got hell for what I did for the next 2 to 3 months, and it traumatized me for the rest of my high school career, paralyzing me from ever asking out a girl or expressing vulnerability to anyone other than my parents. Now, again, it was extremely wrong of her to share our private conversation with the world, but if no one was going to keep me accountable, then who knows what I would have done if I approached the next situation in a similar way. How was I supposed to know that acting like that was completely wrong and frankly weird if I wasn't told or shown on why you shouldn't be treating people that way? This is the power of the consequential life. It's providing a guiding hand to help people learn how to be better members of their community. I'm a very agnostic person. I don't follow a particular religion or believe in a specific God. But the way the consequential life unfolds almost feels like an invisible hand guiding people toward doing the right thing. And it seems to punish those who seek to harm others and reward those who choose to do good. Let's be realistic here. No one wants to be friends with someone who treats them like trash day in, day out. If you were that friend on the receiving end, let's call you person A, you'd want to leave that relationship, therefore punishing the other person, person B, for treating others poorly. In the ideal scenario, person B would ask themselves, hey, one of my friends left me, let me go ask them what is going on. And hopefully it turns out to be a meaningful conversation where this problem could be fixed. Or the opposite could happen, and person B could be delusional and keep on living their life pretending like nothing happened. And they will be and there will be person C, person D, person E, etc., etc., etc. And unless they truly believe there is nothing wrong with how they're acting, they will be lonely, and loneliness kills people. But I digress. Do I wish I had never said those words? Absolutely. But I cannot change the past. And truthfully, I wouldn't be the same person I am today without making some of those embarrassing mistakes. Would it have been nice to already know how to properly ask out a girl and avoid that whole situation? Of course, it'd be foolish not to want that. But the reality is, I wasn't prepared, and I had to learn the hard way. Everyone thinks they're perfect until someone points out their flaws. So is life truly inconsequential? I don't think so. Every decision we make has a ripple effect, whether we realize it or not. Whether it's something as small as a text message or something as big as choosing a career path, every choice shapes the person we become. We may not always be able to see the end result, but that doesn't mean our actions don't matter. Consequences hold us accountable and shape who we become. They're not always bad. Hard work earns promotions. Dedication builds muscle. And studying leads to good grades. But we tend to focus on the negative, fearing punishment rather than embracing the lessons consequences teach us. Maybe instead of running from them, we should learn from them. At the end of the day, I think the real lesson here is to live life with conviction and intention. Enjoy life, take risks, make mistakes. But understand that those mistakes come with lessons. We don't live in a vacuum. And the things we do, no matter how small, can leave a lasting impact. So I'll leave you with this. To those who believe in living the inconsequential life, sure, you can do whatever you want, but don't be surprised when life catches up to you, because it always does in the end. Embrace it with open arms and prepare for what else life has to offer. Thank you for listening. If I don't see you again, good morning, good evening, and good night.